Hello, I hope you're doing well. My name is Arnold and I'll be doing your devotion today. We will be looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 13 and the whole chapter. And basically, for context, we have a story here of the Corinthians who were holding these so-called super apostles. You can read about them in chapter 12 and pretty much throughout the whole of 2 Corinthians you can read about them. These super apostles who were wealthy, eloquent, who were taking money from the Corinthians and they were speaking really well and they were regarded really highly by the Corinthians. Whereas Paul, his authority was being challenged consistently. And as time went on, less and less people were challenging him, and more people were believing in him to actually come with the authority of Jesus Christ, to be from him, and to be worthy of listening to. But there were still a few people who believed that Paul wasn't really anybody in high regard. The reason for this was because he was suffering, he was poor, he would work a very humble job when he was with them. Whereas these other people, they were not suffering. They were wealthy. They were living large. They were taking money from the Corinthians. It was as though, like, I don't know, the Corinthians felt as though they were able to invest in this teaching because they were putting money into it. Whereas Paul didn't want to be a burden among them. And there were still some who were challenging him, and they weren't taking his teachings as seriously. They were still embracing things like sexual immorality, impurity, and sensuality. That's what was going on. And Paul, he's been there 2 times already. The first time was when he was establishing the church. The second time was after writing the first letter, the First Corinthians. And he came with a lot of gentleness and kindness. And now he's warning them. Look, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to come back. And if I come back, I will come with severity. You guys think I'm weak, but I will come with the power of God. I'm warning you. And he then goes on to ask them to examine themselves to see whether or not they are in the faith. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you unless you fail that test? So how do we take that for ourselves? How do we examine ourselves in light of what we've just read? Well, I guess the main way to examine ourselves is actually to think about, what do we hold in high esteem? What do we respect? Jesus, who was rich, became poor so that us who were poor may become rich. And that's a money metaphor to mean that Jesus, who literally had honor and power as well as wealth, had become poor. He had lost that honor. He had become nothing. He had died a slave's death so that we who were slaves to sin may become free and righteous and wealthy in the righteousness of God. And I guess, what do we hold in high esteem? I personally, I run a business, so sometimes, actually quite often, I get tempted by holding people who have the nice cars and the nice houses to be of high esteem because they've established themselves, they've done it, they've managed to actually make a strong business for themselves, and they're the people we should listen to. But that's not the case. We need to regard all people with love and respect all people. And especially when people come to us with authority, we need to listen to them regardless of what is going on in their lives, regardless of whether they're driving a really nice car or not a nice car, whether they're in between houses or actually in a large house. We need to examine ourselves to see whether that Christ is in us. Do we hold the poor Christ who became nothing so that we can be free in high regard? Is that the conditions, or is that the position that we place ourselves, that Jesus is a great authority because he became poor? Are we in the faith, or do we just think that wealth, riches, power, according to the world's view of power, is true power? Well, I'm sure that that isn't the case, but definitely for myself, and I hope for you, we'll take some time out to examine who Jesus actually is. Thanks.